the last 12 years, we've been developing custom apps for businesses across different industry verticals. And we've adopted two engines with other platforms in the market. Uh, by the way, the reason we choose Odoo is in many ways, more than one way. It is my standpoint. With many of the developers, consultants, people in tech industry that is really worth implementing from a business perspective. Okay. So your savvy by default is mandatory, but it is very important that even techies understand the business side of it. So I actually met a CEO who eventually, there are customers right now. So he said uh, uh, they're going for ERP implementation. So they did go with one of the vendors, name I'm not ready to disclose. The implementation was done. Um, it was finally live. The training was done, and everything was done. Everything was up and running. And for multiple reasons, not just to blame the product as such, multiple reasons, they had to, bring it down and go back to their own way of, running operations. So while he said that, they were to say goodbye to Excel, of one important reason. That's because, the application gave them beautiful dashboards, reports, everything. It probably had everything, that a good ERP system should have, but it lacked one important thing. There was always a disconnect between, the business side and the way the workflows were implemented. Okay, so it was 80% close, but not 100% close. So that added up, that kept adding up for 3 months, 6 months, and then eventually they, were at the crossroads. So they decided that we not go ahead with the product by itself. So so that's the case. If techies do not understand business and implement technology, so its lifespan is too short. So that is something which I thought I'll share with you. So what is being tech savvy and what is being business savvy? So let's understand the difference first. Okay, so tech savvy is knowing how to set up a system. Okay, so business savvy is understanding why in the first place the system needs setting up. Okay, why do we need a system? So that fundamental question needs to be understood and answered by any techie for him to meaningfully implement a technology support, technology support for business. So that's a fundamental difference. The problem again here is many business owners often do think they're too much tech savvy. They are a little overconfident. Okay, and that might also be a reason adding up that techies are not talking in business language. But at the same time, we should not shy away from it. Obviously, the business owners are the experts in their own field, understanding the functional knowledge. But at the same time, as techies, we are equally important to question the status quo. Say, for example, if they say that they have an assumption, they do it this way. So we definitely need to ask. It's not challenging them all the time, but at least asking them for clarity and making sure the more the questions that techie shoots, more clarity a business owner would get. So that is something which techies should have ability to do it. So it's not about having a performance rich application or feature rich application which is performing and so on. It is basically understanding why in the first place a specific button is there, why in the first place an approval is needed or not required. Okay, so those fundamental questions need to be addressed here. Okay. Okay. The trap of tool obsession. Okay, so we all have this. So once we are familiar with the tool, we stick on to the tool and we become an advocate of that tool. But at the end of the day, even without understanding what that tool is capable of or not capable of, or in what way the tool is in alignment with business objectives and goals, without really understanding it and sticking on to a tool or a technology for that matter, will actually add up to the chaos. So we have seen this many times. Back in those days, even before we started with Odoo implementation, we used to do custom app development. So whenever our business analyst discusses the requirements with the client would come up with some sort of workflows that would instantly appear to be really absurd. So we will have 4 or 5 ways of implementing. So we would suggest them. Okay, there are some customers who do understand, they listen, they take the final call. Obviously, they have to. But at the same time, some do understand and some do not. Okay, some say no, this is how my business works. I mean, they have so much pride in saying that my business is so unique. This is how we work. There's no other way of implementing it in a better way. So in those cases, we still go ahead and create some custom workflow implementations for those clients. At that point in time, it'll be okay. He'll be the most satisfied person. He'll make you payments on time. Everything is fine. But down the line, as the data grows, as the business grows, the chaos or the limitations or the fundamental issue gets bigger. Okay, that is when he understands. Yeah, you told me the other day. Yeah, similar thing had happened. Okay, so end of the day, we got to think ahead of time. Any technology implementation should not be done for clients at that point in time. Considering their business at that point in time. Any technology implementation, we got to think about 2 years, 3 years down the line. We got to think what's their vision, what are their objectives they've set for their business, goals they've set for their business. We got to have that clarity even before suggesting a specific feature. So I should not. I think after AI implementation, most of them. This is a point that everybody understands. So okay, the change is so rapid. Okay. So automating chaos is still chaos, or it is even more chaos. Okay, you have a fundamental chaos and you automate it, it becomes more chaos. Okay, so the 3-step process again helps here. You got to rethink the rules, question everything, challenge existing assumptions. You got to remove the number of steps. We do this effectively with UI UX. I mean, you have all seen, right? A payment gateway checkout is so easy these days that in one click you get the QR code, you scan via Google Pay. You need not even open Google Pay, automatically it opens Google Pay. All you need to do is give your PIN number. That's it. So the payment is done. Be it for e-bill, be it for any complex payment for that matter. Be it recurring payments. Recurring payments happen by default. So just one click, permission given, recurring payment goes on, periodically. So similar approach should be implemented for business processes as well. So there is an approval process. A boss says that this has to come through my approval. Then we should ask him that what kind of delegation process are you following? What is the authority you have given to that particular role? And why not, give them authority to by setting limits? Say, for example, you have value of about 25K, get an approval from me. Below that, okay, go proceed with it. So it's a very simple example that I'm putting. But the workflow approvals need to be rethought, and so that the number of steps involved in the entire workflow journey can be reduced. So this is something we should take into consideration. That's very important. Then realigning the processes. Okay, so this is a very challenging task because what happens is business owners and C-level executives themselves do have a perfect business vision. They know where they're going. They know what they want. But when it comes to technology implementation, they intervene and their knowledge is their limited knowledge probably limits them even further. Okay, with regard to technology implementation. So that is when it is a bit challenging. We got to gain trust of our customers, make them understand that we understood their business well. That's the first step that we should do. And taking it further, we got to tell them that this is the industry best practice, and for that we got to do our enough research. That's for sure. So any default workflow recommended by products like Odoo, they obviously have done enough research in terms of industry best practices that they've implemented it. So we got to justify it as well, not just tell them that this is how it should work. Okay, we got to justify, tell them the pros and cons of their existing process, and then convince them to realign the process. Okay, based on their business vision. So very challenging task to be taken up by either sales or pre-sales or a functional consultant at times. But it's very, very important to remove the chaos in the system. Okay, so I'll come to this. Okay, so this is very important. Okay, so we got to be the translator. Okay, understanding business and understanding technology. Okay, so we got to connect workflows to business objectives. That's what we saw behind. So we got to translate forms into outcomes. You're collecting these data, what you do with it. So that has to be clearly defined. You got to most importantly align all the KPIs with dashboards. So this is very important. People, whenever you engage with any vendor for that matter, and you set a KPI for them. So what happens? They give a monthly report, a weekly report. Okay, telling them this is what we reached. Okay, this is what we achieved. I'll give you a classic example. So we were working with few retailers, and a common issue that came up with was related to this. What happens? The functional heads will set targets for their salespeople, a counter salespeople. Okay, so each counter salespeople will have weekly target, monthly target, and that target should be based on the previous year's achievement, the previous month's achievement. So that has to be an incremental improvement in terms of sales. So the percentage will be set. So they'll end of the month, end of the week, they'll come up with reports. Tell, see, last week we sold say 40 pieces. This week we have sold 60 pieces. So they'll say there's a 50% hike. Okay, so they'll be so proud about it. Okay, but the actual scenario is when we take Y2D, which is year to date compared to the previous year, the same week they would have sold 100 pieces. Okay, that is because there are some products which are seasonal, which will definitely be sold during that time. Okay, irrespective of your previous month, you cannot compare previous month sales and apply the same rule there. So basically, the system, the dashboard should, the KPIs should align with the dashboards, meaning to say that the value that you see in the dashboard should be meaningful KPIs and not absolute KPIs. Absolute KPIs will give good numbers. It will say 20% increase, 30% increase. All those numbers will be flashy, you can put in graphs, charts, and everything. But end of the day, if you really compare it with the previous month, M to D and Y to D, month to date and year to date comparison, you will really know where that was. Okay? So when it comes to businesses like retail store, the footfall happens seasonally again. Say for example, let's say in the month of May, June, it is a season where the school reopens by July or August. Okay, so there will be a lot of products related to school going, college going kids that will sell the fast. Okay, but the salesperson cannot claim that sales have just increased because of their efforts. It's not so. They can still claim if the previous year's performance was outed, right? If you had surpassed the previous year's numbers by say 20-30%, yeah, they can very well claim. So all the KPIs should be clearly measured and then validated even before displaying in the dashboard. So that's very important. Some of my customers are very intelligent. Whenever we talk about KPIs reports, they say, don't show me any report in graph chart. Don't show me any report in Excel sheet at all. Just give me inference of those reports. That's what they expect. They wanted inference in one liner, two liner. So they wanted reports to say for example, this particular category contributed to 18% of overall product overall sales last year. Okay, but this year it was down by 1%. It is 17%. Okay, but at the same time, the absolute value that particular category contributed this year is say 80k higher than the previous year. Okay, this is the inference that you get. Okay, so the business owners can take decisions once they have this information. So most of the time, what happens? We give them in charts, graphs, and everything, and they need to still again put their brains and work on getting those inferences. So end of the day, that's a real hard work. So they wanted the systems to do that. So we are now working with some AI models which can help us do that. Predictive models of AI does help in identifying this. The same predictive model which we predict the future also can effectively be used for analyzing and giving interpretations. So most of our reports that we do for our clients as part of custom reports, we just give them one page word with 10 lines. That's it. That's what they want. They just wanted the inference from the overall report. And if those inferences deviate from their business goals and objectives, then they drill deeper. They go until the data level, the field level. Okay, that's what they do. But outside, they just want the inferences to be there. Okay, so that is the objective. Okay. Business use cases. Digitizing broken processes. I'm sorry. Should I open? Okay. ERP plus ERP implementation with no process change was an inventory illusion for one of the clients. Okay. So we came up with these two case studies because these are pain points from our customers. Uh, can we have a PDF view of this? It's just overlapping. Right. So ERP implementation with no process change was an inventory illusion here. There are manual dependencies with legacy processes. Like the storekeeper knew the entire stock, like the warehouse about the stock. There was a training gap. There was visualized chaos as well in terms of placement. There was discrepancy as well. Okay, I just want to explain this in detail for you. The discount disaster. See, what happened was this was one of our e-commerce customers. Okay, so they had, they had a system wherein they had partially connected online and offline systems. So they had an e-commerce system partly integrated with their inventory management system. So they had multiple stores, physical stores, and they had e-commerce as well. So when they set up um, offers and promotions, so some promotions were specific to some stores, okay, depending on their shelf life, and there were some promotions specific to on online inventory. So there was a mismatch, and eventually some stores had offers which for which the product return was disabled for them. But the same applied to other stores wherein customers did not buy an offer, but still they weren't able to return the same product. Okay, so these implementations were done incorrect because a proper business case study wasn't done, and all the exception rules weren't configured properly. So that was an issue. The other issue was with regard to people partially implementing any system. We all know that communicating via WhatsApp is so common between employees. So what they do, even before updating real-time data into the system, they just send a WhatsApp to the corresponding team members, and they think that they can do it later, end of the day. Okay, so that also added to the chaos. Right. So being business savvy is thinking in long term. So ERP business comes from clarity and not just features. So this is what we have understood from implementing a lot of custom implementations in the past. Okay, so we got to implement with the end in mind. Okay, so even if it is Odoo implementation, Odoo doesn't transform businesses, but people do. So that is something which we need to have it in mind. So Odoo is the enabler to make things easier. Okay, so the processes are even more important. Okay. So this is one of our clients whom we have done implementation after becoming a partner with Odoo. So they call they Vamana aromas. They basically are into essential oil extracting and distribution business. Okay, so they have 10 key users. They implemented Odoo 18. It's a big case study that we walked through. The modules used were manufacturing, purchase, sales, quality, accounting, inventory, a lot of customization to do as well. Okay, these are the challenges and pain points. So to for us to understand these challenges and pain points, we had to back and forth discuss, make a lot of discussions with the business owner, the business guys, the key people involved in their business. Okay, so unless and until it would not be possible for us to suggest a better solution and work from them. So regarding some terminology, so standardization is giving the same output. See, so it is an agricultural produce. You take oil from say any nuts. You take oil from spices. Okay, say for example cardamom. The cardamom doesn't grow the same way throughout the year. The quality differs, the oil content differs, the climate differs, the size of the cardamom also differs. So quality is also dependent on it. The color differs. Okay, so standardization is a process by which they make sure that every batch of output that's given to their customers has the same set of COAs or customer accepted standards. Okay, so there were some problems, and the impact of that was also captured. The reason we did this detailed analysis because after Odoo implementation, we are now analyzing how things are going. So we're going to analyze for the next 3 months, 6 months, and show them is there a change in impact? Okay, has Odoo really impacted? If so, to what level, to what extent? Okay, if there were 3 rejections per month, so if Odoo had brought it to 2, that's a great achievement. Okay, so that is what we want to measure that. So we have listed down everything in these areas. Okay, so let me quickly walk through what we did for this time. Okay, change and workflow automation. Okay, see basically their business is very unique. I should admit, because the produce is seasonal, the pricing is unpredictable, the price changes overnight. I don't know, if you're all aware of prices of cardamom is actually fixed based on auction. Okay, auction happens every week. Okay, or even every 3 days depending on during peak seasons. and the price outcome of the auction nobody knows, no one knows. Okay, and that is the value fixed. So the Spice Board of India is also involved in this activity, and they leave this authority completely to the farmers. So auction happens in 3 different places. In Pune Hills, in Coorg, some 3 top places. Okay, the auction happens there based on grain. Okay, so the pricing is unpredictable, the availability is unpredictable, the quality of each of those producers are unpredictable. So all their workflows have to have multiple levels of approvals. You cannot say that okay, from this vendor I get say 50 tons of cardamom. You cannot say, because 50 tons of cardamom at the price of say 4,000 rupees is different from saying at the price of 7,000 rupees. That will completely ruin your business. Okay, if it goes with our argument. So there were a lot of tailored workflow automations. There were adaptive pricing and cost control. So we had set up alerts, pricing alerts for the purchase department. Every time before they initiate a purchase, there will be a pricing alert. We have set deviations there. The deviation is too far, then there will be different marking in that alert. So they got to have multiple approvals even before they proceed to the payment. Quality enrichment and standardization. This is the manufacturing process wherein they actually mix different cardamom oils, and then bring it to a standard value before they. So role-based access, obviously, there are 10 users in different departments giving them access. So and we also create smart dashboards for them. Okay, so this is the first step we do. Very first step, we go talk to them, understand their overall workflow, talk to each and every department individually, understand their workflows, and try to map something like this. It's a very basic decision making flow diagram. We actually start with this and get an approval from each and every department based on the workflows. There might be some exceptions. There might be some breaks in between because they are not aware. They might say that this happens once in a while. We cannot leave once in a while scenarios when implementing IT solutions, right? Because that adds to chaos. Okay, so we want to address that as well. So this is how we start working with them. We implemented. We can see we have included a lot of to-do automation notifications. Okay, to-do automation notifications basically are custom notifications that we have done. Custom notifications that we have done to remind them, okay, about their tasks that need to be. Say for example, they got to send a dispatch by 5 p.m. today. We will send 3 notifications, right, from the morning one, afternoon one, final delivery by 2 p.m. Okay, to make sure that everything happens on time. Okay, the reason is people in manufacturing business. I'm not sure how many of you are aware of it. There's something called e-vehicle. Okay, when the dispatch happens on a specific day, e-vehicle has to be generated, uploaded on the GST portal, linked to it, and if it is insurance linked, then the LR copy also need to be the logistics proof copy also need to be updated. Only then your insurance will also work. Okay. In fact, there was a small issue that happened even like 3 months prior to our implementation. So the client had sent order worth 5 lakh rupees to a particular client. Everything was done properly, but for one activity. So they did not upload the LR copy because they said the dispatch van came 1 hour late. So they did not do it that day. So the very same day, after 1 hour from the pickup, the van went with an accident and they lost 5 lakh rupees, completely lost. So the copy wasn't uploaded on they've taken insurance, they paid for insurance, but they did not upload it live. Okay, very small mistake, they lost 5 lakh rupees overnight. Okay, so each and every activity needs to be triggered. We got to keep track that it is done. Okay, so we have implemented to do automations here. Okay, product traceability. Okay, so the same product when it is standardized mixed with some other oil. So say for example 90% concentration oil. They have a batch of 90% concentration. They have a batch of say 70% concentration oil, which has different viscosity. Now client asks for an 80% value. So they mix these two in 50% proposition for the required quantity, and then they change the lot number. So it is the same product, just by mixing two different products, it becomes a different. So basically, you should know that 70% lot was mixed, and how much of that 90% lot was mixed, for you to really have that traceability. So all those traceabilities are also implemented. Manufacturing cost calculation. This was pretty straightforward. Odoo had all the features, so nothing much complex in this. Custom approvals. So custom field creation, yeah, we did a lot of custom field creation in Studio without writing a single line of code. Just configure code. Okay. Okay. So the let me just conclude this. Quite a few points. Let me just. Okay, the quality. Okay, the QC stuff. Okay, so how many of you have worked with QC? Quality control your work. So you know how to set checkpoints, QC, right? So here there are multiple checkpoints required. Okay, so if I go to that, post-purchase QC, okay, post-manufacturing QC, and sales-related QC before dispatch. Okay, what happens is, these are oils, right? So at times oils get rancid. Okay, it gets decolorated. Okay, so you cannot keep the stock for long. The quality will remain the same, but coloration will be different. Okay, so even if you have done QC, you have stored it for say 2 months. If it is a peak summer, it's a hot summer, there's a possibility that the coloration might happen pretty fast. So even before dispatch, another QC set of QC has to be done. See, these are very sensitive because most of their clients are big FMCG giants. Few of the clients, they actually sell to Britannia, they sell to Haldiram's. Okay, so that's their clients. So you know how specific they are about standardization of those products. Otherwise, they just reject it. It's as simple as that. So we got it, we got it. They also are in export business. So once a consignment is out of the country, you got to forget about it. Even if they accept or reject, there's no point in bringing it back. Okay, it doesn't make any sense. Yeah. So pretty much that's it. So we got to be the bridge between tech and business. We got to think beyond just modules and features and workflows. We got to challenge inefficient workflows. We got to lead the change. So tech savvy gets you go live, and if you're plus business savvy, it'll actually get you to go live. So thank you for your time. Any questions before we wrap up?
How Odoo helps to generate inferences from chart or data?
Yes, how Odoo helps?
Generate inferences to the management or to the decision making.
Yes, we have written custom rules. No, I don't have the logins right now. We can, you can actually connect with me after this call. I can tell you. So we've written custom business rules and triggers. Yes. Exactly. Yes. Say for example, I'll give a small example. Say for example, if we have a flat sales figure, daily sales or weekly sales report. Okay, and in that weekly sales report, we have numbers like this client, this was the sales books. Okay, so how many of them were repeat purchases? How many of them were new clients? Okay, how many of them were prospects that were in pipeline who were converted? Okay, these are the three categories. Okay, prospects and pipelines are converted is the effort of the salesperson, persistent effort of the salesperson. A new order which has just come in because of some sort of emergency or demand in the market, there's no sales effort for it actually. It is because of market demand, there was a need, and he was able to book the sale immediately. It was an inbound inquiry. It was not an outbound effort. Hmm. I'll tell you. So we have three here. Three cases. One is repeat purchase of your existing customers. They've upsold. They've raised another PO. But existing customers, they know about you. Meaning to say, you cannot give this particular credit to the salesperson directly because all the sales incentives are based on this, right? And if the pipeline has been converted and the new order has been generated, so that credit has to go to that particular salesperson. Right? If there's a market demand and instantly you've got a new customer without any inquiry, without even asking for samples, it means there's a market demand. Okay, you can maybe partially give credits to the salesperson. Okay, so the inference when it comes to salesperson's performance, we analyze this, give them 20% of the total order value was generated out of salesperson effort in this month. Okay, so that is the inference that we give them. This is just an example. Okay, so a lot of reports, we have done this inference actually. Converting and understanding, metrics to meaningful information. Converting it to meaningful information and doing comparison as well. At times, we also do a comparison and say this is the absolute performance, but compared to last month or last year to date, this is less. Or comparing to another salesperson, he has done 30% lower. See, as far as Odoo is concerned, product Odoo. Okay, two things. One, to certain extent, you can configure Odoo and then generate these numbers, the final number, cumulative numbers. Okay, inferences we got to do it. We got to write rules manually. Yes, that's how it works.